I woke up from a 6-day coma to find my sister wearing my wedding dress, living in my fiancé's penthouse, and spending my money. The wedding I'd spent a year planning, it happened, just without the bride, because according to my family, I was too unstable to get married, so they let my sister marry him instead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to when my life still made sense, back to when I believed family meant loyalty and love meant forever. Charleston in April smells like jasmine and salt water, the kind of combination that makes you believe in second chances. I'd spent the morning at the final dress fitting, standing on that little platform, while the seamstress pinned the hem of ivory silk that cost more than my first car. Grace stood behind me, her reflection in the three-way mirror showing that particular smile she got when she was trying not to cry. The dress fit like it had been designed specifically for my body, which it had. Custom Vera Wang, because Alex insisted his bride deserved the best. The fabric caught the light every time I moved, sending little ripples of shine across the surface. I'd never worn anything so beautiful in my life. 58 years old, and I was getting the fairy tale I thought I'd missed. Grace's voice came soft from behind me. "You deserve this. After everything with Thomas." I met her eyes in the mirror, saw the weight of shared history there. Grace had been with me through Thomas's funeral, through the 3 years of grief that followed, through every dark moment when I thought I'd never feel whole again. She knew what this wedding meant. Not just a ceremony, proof that life could surprise you, even when you thought all your surprises were behind you. The seamstress stepped back, satisfied with her work. I turned slowly, watching the dress move with me. Saturday. Just 4 more days until I became Mrs. Alexander Thornton. Grace pulled out her phone to take a photo. That's when I noticed her screen, saw the text notification from my sister that she quickly swiped away. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. Charleston Harbor Resort had transformed their ballroom into something from a dream. 200 guests confirmed. Menu finalized, flowers ordered, musicians rehearsed, every detail perfect, because Alex had hired the best wedding planner in South Carolina. Every detail except one, my family. Natalie arrived at my house that Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before the accident that would change everything. She came with suitcases, a wide smile, and the kind of enthusiasm that should have set off alarms in my head. "I'm here to help." She swept through my front door like she owned the place, already talking about vendor confirmations and seating charts and a dozen other details I'd already handled weeks ago. "You shouldn't have to do all this alone. That's what sisters are for." I watched her unpack in my guest room, her clothes spreading across surfaces with the casual ownership of someone who belonged there. She held up her dress for the wedding, a soft blue that complemented the bridesmaids without competing. Everything about her presentation screamed supportive, loving sister. Everything except her eyes, which kept cataloging my house with an appraiser's calculation. "This place is worth what now, with the Charleston market the way it is?" She ran her hand along my antique dresser, the one Thomas and I had restored together during our first year of marriage. "I haven't had it appraised recently." "But Alex's real estate company would know, right? He must have people who could tell you exactly what you're sitting on here." I moved past her to hang up the blue dress, creating distance. "I'm not selling. This house has memories." "Oh, I didn't mean—" Her laugh came too quick, too bright. "I was just curious. You know me, always thinking about property values. Occupational hazard of watching too much HGTV." Natalie worked as an event planner, or tried to. I knew her business had been struggling, had heard from our mother that she'd had to let go of her assistant and downsize her office. But I didn't know about the debt. Not then. That revelation would come later, during Grandmother Dot's investigation, when we'd discover exactly how desperate my sister had become. Wednesday morning started with coffee and wedding planning spread across my kitchen table. Natalie had made herself at home, already brewing a pot before I came downstairs, already reviewing the vendor contracts I'd carefully organized in labeled folders. "You need to pick up the marriage license today." She tapped the courthouse address on her phone. "It's a 30-mile drive and they close at 4. Want me to drive you? We can make it a sister thing." I should have said no. I should have sensed something wrong in how quickly she volunteered, how eager she seemed to get me alone in a car on a coastal highway. But I was swimming in wedding details and pre-ceremony jitters, and having someone offer to help felt like kindness. "That would be great. Alex is in back-to-back meetings all day anyway. We left at 2, taking Natalie's rental car because she claimed mine had a tire that looked low. The drive followed the coast road, all sharp curves and scenic overlooks and guardrails that were the only thing between pavement and a 40-foot drop to rocks and water. Natalie drove fast, but not recklessly. Not at first. She talked while she drove, her voice casual, her questions anything but. Are you absolutely sure Alex loves you? Not just your military background or your connections or the way you look good at his charity events. My stomach tightened. That's an odd question. I'm just saying he's so much younger than his usual social circle. Do you really fit in with those people? The country club wives and the yacht owners and all those women who've never worked a day in their lives. Natalie, and you barely knew Thomas before you married him, right? 6 months? How long have you known Alex? 18 months? Do you see a pattern here? Do you think maybe you rush into things because you're afraid of being alone? The jasmine-scented air suddenly felt suffocating. I turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw something in her profile that made my pulse spike. She wasn't making conversation. She was building a case. Why are you saying this? I just want you to be sure. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. I want you to think about whether you're making a mistake. Pull over. Cass, pull over now. I'll drive the rest of the way. That's when she swerved. Not dramatically, not obviously. Just a sudden jerk to the right toward the guardrail, timed perfectly with a curve in the road. I heard myself shout something, heard metal screaming against metal, felt the impact travel through my skull as my head met the window with a crack that seemed to echo inside my brain. The last thing I heard before darkness took me was Natalie's voice, calm and clear on her phone. It's done. She's hurt. Get ready. Then nothing. Grace got the call at 3:47. She told me later that she was in the middle of a patient consultation, that she almost didn't answer, that some instinct made her step out of the exam room and take the unknown number. This is Charleston Memorial. Are you Grace Kim, emergency contact for Cassandra Morrison? Grace's hands went numb. She'd been Cassandra's emergency contact for 3 years, ever since Thomas died, and Cass had quietly updated all her paperwork to list her best friend instead of her parents. In all that time, Grace had never gotten the call. Until now. What happened? Ms. Morrison was in a car accident. She's unconscious, severe head trauma. We've admitted her to ICU and induced a medical coma to reduce brain swelling. We need you to come as soon as possible. Grace made the 2-hour drive from Columbia in 90 minutes, breaking every speed limit, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. Traumatic brain injury. Induced coma. Those weren't words that led to quick recoveries and happy endings. Those were words that changed lives, if the patient survived at all. She arrived at Charleston Memorial just after 6, still in her scrubs from work, and headed straight for ICU. That's where she found Natalie, already entrenched, already performing the role of devastated sister. Natalie sat in the waiting area with red-rimmed eyes and a tissue clutched in one hand, talking to a doctor in a white coat. She looked up when Grace approached, and for just a second, before the grief mask slipped back into place, Grace saw something else. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Grace, oh God, Grace, it's so awful. Natalie stood, arms reaching for a hug that Grace instinctively avoided. We hit a deer. The car just swerved, and Cass wasn't wearing her seatbelt, and she hit her head, and there was so much blood. Grace's training kicked in, the clinical detachment that let her process information without emotion. What are her injuries? The doctor answered, consulting his tablet. Traumatic brain injury, grade 3, skull fracture, temporal region, significant brain swelling. We've induced a coma to give her brain time to heal. She'll be under for at least 5 to 7 days. Can I see her? Family only right now. Natalie touched the doctor's arm with practiced familiarity. She's family. Cass would want her here. Grace followed them through double doors into ICU, into a room that smelled of antiseptic and machinery. Cass lay in the bed, head bandaged, breathing tube down her throat, monitors beeping in steady rhythm. She looked smaller than Grace had ever seen her, vulnerable in a way that felt fundamentally wrong. This was a woman who'd commanded Coast Guard rescue operations in Category 4 hurricanes. This was a woman who'd saved 17 lives during one storm alone. Seeing her reduced to this, helpless and silent, made Grace's hands curl into fists. The prognosis. Grace kept her voice clinical, her questions precise. Too early to tell. Brain injuries are unpredictable. We'll know more when we bring her out of the coma. Natalie stepped closer to the bed, but she wasn't looking at Cass. She was looking at the monitors, at the IV lines, at all the equipment keeping her sister alive. Grace caught the calculation in that gaze, saw the mental inventory being taken. What about long-term effects? Natalie's voice carried just the right amount of concern. Could there be mental impairment, memory loss, personality changes? The doctor hesitated. Possible, but again, too early to determine. Some patients recover completely, others don't. Natalie finished the sentence with something that wasn't quite hope, wasn't quite fear, something that made Grace's stomach turn. After the doctor left, Natalie pulled out her phone and made a call. Grace stood on the other side of Cass's bed, watching, listening. Mom, it's bad. Really bad. They have her in a coma. Pause. I don't know, days, maybe a week. Another pause, longer this time. The wedding? I'm handling it. Someone has to. Her eyes met Grace's across the bed. I should go. I'll call you later. Grace waited until Natalie pocketed her phone before speaking. When did Cass sign a medical power of attorney? What? The doctor said you presented POA documents. When did my best friend, who tells me everything, sign over medical decision-making authority to you? Natalie's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. Last week. She wanted family to have final say if anything happened. You understand. Show me the documents. They're with the hospital administration. I'll get you copies. Grace pulled out her own phone, opened her text with Cass. The last message was from Monday. Final fitting tomorrow. Can't believe this is real. No mention of POA. No mention of giving Natalie any authority at all. I'm her healthcare proxy. Have been for 3 years. Unless she revoked that in writing, I'm the one who makes medical decisions. Natalie's performance finally cracked, just a little. We'll let the hospital sort it out. Right now, Cass needs us to focus on her recovery, not fight over paperwork. Grace bit back the response she wanted to give. Instead, she pulled a chair close to Cass's bed and sat down. I'm not going anywhere. Suit yourself. Natalie gathered her purse. I need to make some calls about the wedding, about vendors. Someone has to handle the details. After she left, Grace pulled out her phone and sent a text to the one person she knew would understand the wrongness of the situation. Grandmother Dot, something is very wrong. Natalie is lying about the accident. Call me. The response came back within minutes. On my way. Hour 12 of Cass's coma brought Alexander Thornton. Grace had dozed off in her chair, head resting against the wall, when the door opened, and he walked in. She'd met Alex twice before, both times at veteran charity events where Cass volunteered. In person, he had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it, the quiet confidence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing and knew exactly what he was worth. Right now, though, he looked destroyed. How is she? His voice came out rough, like he'd been crying. Stable, unconscious. They won't know extent of damage until they bring her out of the coma. Alex moved to the bedside, reached for Cass's hand with a gentleness that made Grace's throat tight. This was a man in love. This was real. Whatever Natalie was planning, it would have to go through him first. Then Natalie appeared in the doorway. Alex. She said his name like a prayer. I'm so sorry. I tried to call you earlier, but you were in meetings and I didn't want to interrupt, and... What happened? He didn't look away from Cass. Natalie moved closer, positioning herself on his other side, creating a triangle with Cass in the center. We were driving to the courthouse for the marriage license. A deer jumped out. I swerved. The car hit the guardrail, and Cass, her voice broke perfectly, tears appearing on cue. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. I told her to put it on, but she was distracted, talking about the wedding, and then the deer, and I just reacted and... Grace stood up. That's not what you told the paramedics. Natalie's eyes went sharp. What? You told the paramedics she was wearing her seatbelt. You said it failed. The accident report says the seatbelt was found cut. Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady beep of monitors. Alex turned to Natalie. The seatbelt was cut? I don't know. Maybe it was damaged in the impact. I was in shock. I probably misremembered. You were pretty specific with your story a few hours ago. Grace stepped around the bed, putting herself between Natalie and Cass. Down to the detail about how the deer came from the left and you swerved right. Now it's a vague memory. I've been through a trauma. My sister is in a coma. I'm doing the best I can. Natalie's voice rose, performance shifting from grief to defensive. She turned to Alex, tears streaming now. I can't believe she's attacking me at a time like this. Cass was having doubts, Alex, about the wedding, about whether she was ready. We were talking about it when she got distracted, and that's when the dear. Stop! Alex's voice cut through the room like a blade. Cass was having doubts? She didn't want to worry you, but she told me she felt pressured, that everything was moving too fast, that she wasn't sure if. Grace's phone buzzed. A text from Dot. At hospital. Don't let Natalie leave. That's not true. Grace kept her voice level, her eyes on Alex. Cass called me Monday night. She talked for an hour about how happy she was, how she couldn't believe she got to have this, how you made her feel like herself again for the first time since Thomas died. Does that sound like someone having doubts? Alex's jaw tightened. He looked down at Cass, unconscious and silent, unable to confirm or deny. Grace could see him trying to decide who to believe, the sister who'd been in the car or the best friend who'd known Cass for 15 years. Natalie pressed her advantage. Grace means well, but she doesn't know Cass like family does. Cass has always been good at presenting one face to friends and hiding her real feelings from family. She did it with Thomas, too. Rushed into that marriage and then spent years pretending it was perfect when anyone could see. The door opened and Grandmother Dot walked in. At 84, Dorothy Morrison still moved like the federal prosecutor she'd been for 30 years. Sharp eyes, sharper mind, and absolutely zero tolerance for deception. She took in the scene with one sweep of her gaze. Cass unconscious, Grace protective, Natalie performing, Alex confused. Everyone out! Now except Grace. Grandmother, Natalie started. Out. This is a hospital room, not a theater. Cassandra needs rest, not a family drama. Alex looked between Dot and Natalie, clearly torn. Dot made the decision for him. Mr. Thornton, I assume you have lawyers who can review accident reports and hospital documentation. I suggest you call them. There are questions about this accident that need answering before anyone makes assumptions about my granddaughter's state of mind. Mrs. Morrison, I appreciate your concern, but it's not concern, it is fact. Someone cut that seatbelt, someone disconnected that airbag, and I intend to find out who. Natalie's face went white. You can't possibly think I would. I think we're all upset and making poor decisions. So let's give Cassandra the gift of peace and quiet while her brain heals. Out. Both of you. They left. Grace stayed. Dot closed the door behind them and turned to Grace, with eyes that had seen 30 years of liars in courtrooms. Tell me everything. Grace did. Every detail, every inconsistency, every moment that felt wrong. Dot listened without interrupting, pulling out a small notebook to jot down timeline details and contradictions. When Grace finished, Dot sat in the chair Alex had vacated and stared at her unconscious granddaughter. Natalie's been researching something on her laptop. I saw the search history last time I visited her house. Dot's voice was quiet but certain. Marriage by proxy, guardian of incapacitated adult, power of attorney limitations in South Carolina. Grace's blood went cold. When was this? 2 months ago. I thought she was researching for a client. She's an event planner. They work with all kinds of family situations. But now it looks like she was researching how to replace Cass. Dot pulled out her phone, opened an app Grace didn't recognize. I record family dinners, have for 3 years since I started noticing inconsistencies in how Richard and Patricia reported family events. South Carolina is one-party consent for recordings. Everything is legal. You record your own son? I record everyone, and I'm very glad I do. Dot's fingers moved across the screen, pulling up files organized by date. Here, from 6 weeks ago. Family dinner at Richard and Patricia's house. Listen. She hit play. Natalie's voice came through, tinny but clear. If only Cass would just disappear for a while. Just take herself out of the equation and let the rest of us live our lives. Patricia's voice. She's always been the golden child. Military service, widow's benefits, now a billionaire fiancé. What have you gotten, Natalie? What have any of us gotten? Richard. It's not Natalie's fault she made different choices. If Cass would just share some of that wealth, help family instead of hoarding. Natalie. I don't need her charity. I need her to step aside. The recording ended. Grace stared at Dot. There's more. Hours of it. Natalie talking about how Alex is wasted on Cass. Patricia agreeing that Cass doesn't appreciate what she has. Richard suggesting that maybe the family should help guide the situation. Dot closed the app. I didn't know what they were planning. I just knew something was wrong. Now I know I should have acted sooner. We need to tell the police. We will. But first, we need to document everything while Cass is unable to speak for herself. Because I guarantee you, Natalie is already building her narrative. Dot was right. Over the next 3 days, as Cass's brain swelled and healed in medically induced silence, Natalie orchestrated a campaign of manipulation that would have impressed a political strategist. She called the wedding planner, asking about postponement policies and whether the venue could reschedule. She called Cass's lawyer, claiming to need access to Cass's documents in case something happens. She called the bank, attempting to access the joint account Cass and Alex had opened for wedding expenses, blocked only by two-factor authentication that required Cass's phone. Grace watched it all from her post in the ICU, leaving only to shower and change clothes. She documented every visitor, every phone call Natalie made in the hallway, every moment that felt calculated rather than genuine. On day 3, Grace caught Natalie in the private bathroom attached to Cass's room, standing in front of the mirror with something in her hands. Grace pushed the door open wider and felt her stomach drop. Natalie was holding a wedding dress. Not just any wedding dress. Cass's wedding dress, the custom Vera Wang, that should have been hanging safely in the bridal boutique. What the hell are you doing? Natalie didn't even have the grace to look guilty. She held the dress up to her body, examining her reflection. Checking if the alterations were done correctly, for when we return it. Grace stepped into the bathroom, forcing Natalie to acknowledge her presence. That's not your job, that's not your dress, and you have no reason to be holding it except… Except what? Except you think I'm planning something? Natalie's mask dropped completely, just for a moment. You don't know anything, Grace. You're not family. You're just the friend who's overstayed her welcome. I'm her healthcare proxy. We'll see about that. Natalie folded the dress carefully, reverently, and walked past Grace back into the hospital room. She hung the dress in the small closet, her movements possessive and practiced. Cass signed new paperwork before the accident. The hospital is just being slow about processing it. But when they do, you'll have no authority here, and then we'll see who's really family. After Natalie left, Grace pulled out her phone and called Dot. She had Cass's wedding dress in the hospital. She was trying it on. I know. I've been tracking communications. Natalie called the bridal boutique yesterday, claiming to be Cass, and had the dress sent to the hospital. The boutique thought it was strange, but confirmed the order because it came from Cass's phone. Dot's voice carried the weight of someone connecting dots into a picture they didn't want to see. Grace, I need you to prepare yourself for something. I think Natalie is planning to take Cass's place at the wedding. The words hung in the air between them, too absurd to be real, too logical to dismiss. That's insane, is it? Cass is unconscious. The wedding is in 3 days. All the vendors are paid, all the guests are invited, all the arrangements are made. If Natalie can convince Alex that Cass wanted this, that Cass gave her blessing, that Cass knew she was too unstable to go through with it. Dot paused. She's been building to this for months, maybe years. This accident just gave her the opportunity. Grace looked at Cass, still and silent in the hospital bed. We have to stop her. We will. I'm gathering evidence, legal documents, recordings, financial records showing Natalie's debt. But I need time. And I need you to keep watch. Don't let her near Cass alone. Don't let her manipulate the doctors. And for God's sake, don't let her convince Alex. Too late for that last part. Alex arrived that evening with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Goldstein, who carried a briefcase and an expression that said she'd seen too much to be shocked by anything. They asked Grace to step out. She refused. They asked Dot to leave. She stayed. Sarah placed a folder on the table beside Cass's bed. Mr. Thornton has asked me to review the situation and make recommendations regarding the wedding scheduled for Saturday. The wedding will be postponed. Grace kept her voice flat. Obviously. That's not necessarily obvious. Sarah opened the folder, revealing documents Grace didn't recognize. Ms. Morrison apparently prepared for this contingency. She pulled out a letter, handwritten on Cass's personal stationery. Grace knew that stationery. Knew the letterhead, the weight of the paper, the cream color Cass preferred. The handwriting looked right at first glance, all the loops and slants matching Cass's style. But the date was wrong. Sarah read aloud. If anything should happen to me before my wedding to Alexander Thornton, I want my sister Natalie to take my place. I know this sounds strange, but Alex deserves happiness, and Natalie has always understood him in ways I never could. I've been having doubts about whether I'm ready for this commitment. The accident with the deer on our drive to the courthouse confirmed my fears. If I'm injured or unable to go through with the wedding, please don't let my uncertainty ruin Alex's chance at love. Let Natalie step in. She'll make him happy in ways I cannot. Silence filled the room. Grace found her voice first. That letter is dated April 15th. Yes, Sarah consulted her notes. Mrs. Morrison wrote it 3 days before the accident, according to the notary stamp. The accident was April 12th. Grace pulled out her phone, showed the news report she'd saved. That letter is dated 3 days after Cass was already in a coma. It's a forgery. Alex's face went white. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened with the kind of focus that came from finding a crack in an opponent's case. That's impossible. That's impossible. The notary is legitimate. The signature is probably close enough to fool most people. But Cass couldn't have written this letter on April 15th because she's been unconscious since April 12th. Someone forged this. Someone who had access to her stationery, her writing samples, and a notary willing to backdate a stamp. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a call. I need you to verify a notary authorization. Yes, immediately. She rattled off the number from the letter, then waited. When her face changed, Grace knew they'd found the proof. The notary license was suspended last year for fraudulent practices. Sarah closed her phone. This document is worthless. Alex sank into a chair, head in his hands. She showed me this 3 days ago. Natalie. She said Cass had been planning for contingencies. That Cass knew she wasn't stable enough for marriage. I believed her because... His voice broke. Because it was easier than facing the truth. That Cass was hurt, and I couldn't fix it. Grace moved closer. Natalie has been planning this. We have proof. Recordings of family conversations, evidence of financial desperation, a pattern of manipulation going back months. Then we stop the wedding. Alex looked up. We postpone everything. We wait for Cass to wake up. But Saturday came anyway, indifferent to prayers and plans. Dot woke Grace with a phone call at 6 in the morning. Grace had finally gone home to shower and sleep in her own bed, leaving a nurse she trusted to watch over Cass. She grabbed the phone, heart already racing. She's gone. What? Who's gone? Is Cass... Cass is fine. Natalie is gone. Left the hospital at 5 this morning. And Grace, the wedding venue, just confirmed that the ceremony is proceeding as scheduled. Natalie told them the bride would arrive by noon. Grace was out of bed and dressed in under 5 minutes, speeding toward Charleston Harbor Resort before Dot even finished explaining the details. But Dot had left even earlier, was already at the venue when Grace pulled into the parking lot at 9:30. The resort looked exactly as Cass had planned it. White chairs in perfect rows, facing an arch covered in roses and jasmine, tables set with ivory linens and crystal, a string quartet warming up in the corner, 200 guests beginning to arrive, all dressed for a celebration, all expecting to witness Cassandra Morrison marry Alexander Thornton. Dot met Grace at the entrance, her face set in lines of fury Grace had never seen before. She's in the bridal suite. They didn't run. Running would cause a scene, would alert security, would give Natalie warning. Instead, they walked with purpose through the resort's elegant hallways, past confused staff members who tried to stop them, past the wedding planner who looked relieved to see family members arriving. The bridal suite door was unlocked. Inside, Natalie sat at the vanity in full makeup, a hairstylist working on an updo that matched exactly the style Cass had chosen from inspiration photos pinned to her wedding planning board. The custom Vera Wang hung on a hook behind her, ready to be worn. Flowers sat in water, waiting to be carried. Shoes, the exact ones Cass had selected, sat beside the chair. Natalie met Dot's eyes in the mirror and smiled. You can't stop this. Dot's voice came out cold and precise. What are you doing? What Cass can't do. Natalie turned on her chair, dismissing the hairstylist with a wave. The woman left, clearly uncomfortable. Someone has to marry Alex. He loves the Morrison family. I'm just stepping in, being practical. This is insane. Is it? Natalie stood, moved toward the dress with a reverence that felt like theft. Or is it smart? Cass might not wake up the same. She might not wake up at all. Alex deserves happiness. I can give him that. And legally, I'll be Mrs. Thornton. That's all that matters. Grace stepped forward. He doesn't love you. He will. Men like Alex don't stay single. They need someone to fill the role. And I know how to be what he needs better than Cass ever did. Natalie touched the dress, ran her fingers over the silk. She never appreciated any of it. The money, the status, the opportunity. She treated it all like some burden she had to bear instead of the gift it was. I'll appreciate every second. Dot pulled out her phone. I'm calling the police. On what grounds? That I'm getting ready for a wedding? That I'm wearing a dress that belongs to my family? That I'm marrying a man who consented to marry a Morrison woman? Natalie's smile widened. Check with the venue. Check with Alex. They all confirmed this morning. The ceremony is happening. The only question is whether you make a scene and embarrass the family or whether you let this happen quietly. Grace looked at Dot. Dot looked back. And in that moment, they both understood. Natalie had already won this battle. She'd positioned herself too carefully, built her story too thoroughly. Stopping the wedding now would require police involvement, would create exactly the kind of public scandal that would destroy any chance of annulment later. We're going to find Alex. Dot's voice carried the weight of 30 years prosecuting criminals. And we're going to make sure he knows exactly what he's doing. They found Alex in the groom's preparation room, already in his tuxedo, looking at his phone with an expression that might have been grief or might have been surrender. When Dot walked in, he stood up like a soldier coming to attention. Mrs. Morrison, I know what you're going to say. Then you know this is wrong. I know this is insane. I know it's probably the worst decision I'll ever make. But Natalie showed me the paperwork. The doctor's evaluation saying Cass has early dementia. The blessing letter. Both forged. We proved the letter was backdated. And there is no doctor's evaluation because Cass is cognitively fine. She has a brain injury that will heal. Alex closed his eyes. Her parents confirmed everything. They showed me medical records going back 5 years, psychiatric holds, erratic behavior, suicide attempts. Lies. Dot stepped closer. All lies designed to make you doubt her. Richard and Patricia are helping Natalie steal your wedding because they think you're a blank check they can cash. Then show me proof, real proof, not just accusations. Dot pulled out her phone, played the recordings. Natalie discussing how to replace Cass. Patricia agreeing Cass didn't deserve wealth. Richard suggesting they help guide the situation. The audio was damning, clear, undeniable. Alex listened to all of it, his face going from pale to gray. When the recordings ended, he sat back down. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because we didn't know what they were planning. Not until it was already in motion. Dot sat across from him. You can still stop this. Call it off. Wait for Cass to wake up. And if she doesn't? Alex's voice came out broken. The doctor said there's a chance of permanent damage, a chance she won't be the same person. What if I wait and she wakes up and doesn't even know who I am? Then you deal with that when it happens. But you don't marry her sister while she's unconscious. Alex was quiet for a long moment. Then, Natalie said if I back out now, she'll sue for breach of promise. She'll claim I led her on, promised to take care of the family, made commitments I'm now breaking. She has emails, texts, conversations where I talked about supporting Cass's family after the wedding. Grace laughed, short and bitter. She's blackmailing you. She's protecting her interests. And maybe, Alex looked up, eyes desperate. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is what Cass would want. For the wedding to happen, for me to be happy, for someone to step in when she can't. Dot stood. If you do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I already regret it, but I'm doing it anyway. There was nothing left to say. Dot and Grace left the groom's suite, walked back through hallways now filling with guests, past decorations that had been meant for celebration, and now felt like a funeral. At 11:30, Dot tried one more time. She approached the officiant, a kind-faced minister who'd been honored to perform the ceremony for a Coast Guard veteran and her billionaire fiancé. She explained the situation, showed the evidence, pleaded with him to refuse. He listened with compassion and regret. Without a legal injunction, I can't refuse to perform a wedding between two consenting adults. I'm sorry. At 11:45, Richard and Patricia arrived, both dressed in formal attire, both smiling like this was the happiest day of their lives. They saw Dot standing near the entrance, and their smiles faltered, but only for a moment. Mother, Richard's voice carried warning, don't make a scene. Your daughter is marrying her sister's fiancé. While that sister lies in a coma from an accident, we have evidence was deliberate, and you're okay with this? Patricia touched her pearls, a nervous gesture Dot remembered from childhood. Natalie explained everything. This is what Cass wanted. We're honoring her wishes. You're stealing her life. We're protecting the family. Richard stepped closer. And if you try to disrupt this ceremony, we'll have security remove you. You're an old woman who's confused about facts. Everyone will understand. Dot looked at her son, this man she'd raised, and saw a stranger. When Cass wakes up, and she will wake up, she'll never forgive you. Then that's the price we pay for doing what's right. At noon exactly, music began to play. The guests stood. The ceremony started. Dot and Grace stood at the back of the venue, watching like witnesses to a crime they couldn't prevent. The minister took his place at the altar. Alex stood beside him, his face a mask that might have been composure or might have been despair. Then Natalie appeared at the end of the aisle. She wore Cass's dress perfectly, carried Cass's flowers, walked to Cass's music. Behind her, Richard and Patricia walked together, both giving away a daughter who wasn't the one who'd planned this moment. The ceremony proceeded with horrible efficiency, vows that had been written for Cass, spoken by Natalie, rings that had been chosen for a different bride, a kiss that sealed a marriage built on fraud and unconsciousness and family betrayal. When the minister announced them as husband and wife, the guests applauded. 200 people witnessed Natalie Morrison become Mrs. Alexander Thornton in a wedding that should have belonged to someone else. Grace pulled out her phone and recorded the final moments, not for social media, for evidence. After the ceremony, as guests moved to the reception area, Dot and Grace slipped away. They drove back to the hospital in silence, past Charleston's pretty streets and jasmine-scented air that now felt poisonous. In the ICU, Cass lay exactly as they'd left her, unchanged, unaware, protected by machines and medication from the knowledge of what had just been done to her. Grace sat in her usual chair and pulled up the video she'd recorded, watched Natalie kiss Alex at the altar, watched Richard and Patricia beam with pride, watched 200 guests celebrate a wedding that was fundamentally a theft. Dot stood at the window, phone in her hand, already calling lawyers and investigators, and everyone who might help build a case when Cass finally woke up. She's going to destroy them. Dot's voice carried absolute certainty. When Cassandra wakes up and finds out what they did, she's going to destroy all of them. Grace looked at the monitors tracking Cass's vital signs, watched the steady lines that indicated a brain healing, functions recovering, consciousness slowly returning to a body that had been forced to rest. How long until she wakes up? Tomorrow, maybe the day after. The doctors are already talking about reducing sedation, bringing her back gradually. And when she does? Dot turned from the window, and Grace saw the prosecutor she'd once been, the woman who'd built cases against people who thought they were too clever to get caught. When she wakes up, we tell her everything. We show her the evidence. We give her every weapon we've collected over the past 6 days. And then we watch Cassandra Morrison do what she does best, survive what tried to destroy her, and make damn sure it never happens to anyone else. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Cass's eyelids fluttered, just slightly, the first sign of consciousness beginning to return. Grace leaned close, whispered words Cass couldn't hear yet but would hear soon. I'm sorry we couldn't stop it. I'm sorry we failed you, but we documented everything. And when you wake up, we're going to make this right, I promise. Outside the hospital, Natalie posted the first photos to social media. Beautiful shots of her in Cass's dress, her with Alex, her cutting a cake that had been ordered for someone else. The caption read, "Finally found my forever. So grateful for this unexpected blessing." The comments rolled in, hundreds of them, confusion mixing with congratulations. Friends of Cass asking questions, Natalie's friends celebrating. And through it all, Natalie playing the role of blushing bride, carefully avoiding any mention of her sister lying unconscious just miles away. Dot watched the posts with cold calculation, screenshotting each one, saving them to the growing file of evidence. Every word Natalie wrote, every image she posted, every lie she told would become ammunition. She thinks she's won. Dot closed the social media app. She thinks because she got the ceremony, got the legal paperwork, got the witnesses, that this is over. Isn't it? Grace heard the exhaustion in her own voice. Marriages can be annulled, especially when built on fraud, especially when the groom can prove he was deceived about material facts, especially when we have evidence of premeditation. Dot pulled up the recordings again. Natalie made one crucial mistake. She documented her planning. She talked about it at family dinners. She researched it on her laptop. She left a trail. But will it be enough? It will have to be, because the alternative is letting her get away with it. Grace looked back at Cass, at her best friend who'd survived storms and loss and 30 years in the Coast Guard, only to be brought down by the people who should have protected her most. When she wakes up, this is going to break her. When she wakes up, Dot corrected, she's going to be angry. And Cassandra Morrison angry is a force of nature. I've seen her plan rescue operations in Category 4 hurricanes. Taking down her own family will be easier. It will just hurt more. The night settled over Charleston. In the resort ballroom, Natalie danced with Alex at a reception meant for someone else. In the hospital, Grace kept watch over Cass's unconscious form. And in her hotel room, Dot worked through the night, building a case file that would become the foundation of everything that followed. By morning, two things had changed. Natalie had officially become Mrs. Alexander Thornton, with legal documents and witness signatures to prove it. And Cass's brain activity had increased to levels that indicated consciousness returning, that suggested the induced coma had done its job, that promised she would wake soon. Dot sent a final text to Grace at dawn. Be ready. When she wakes up, we need to tell her immediately, before anyone else can spin the story, before Natalie can get to her. Grace replied, I'm here, I'm not leaving. The monitors continued their steady rhythm. The morning light crept through the hospital windows. And somewhere in the darkness of medically induced sleep, Cassandra Morrison began the slow journey back to consciousness, back to a world that had been stolen while she dreamed, back to a life she would have to fight to reclaim. I opened my eyes, expecting to see my fiancé. Instead, I saw my best friend crying, and my grandmother looking at me like I'd just come back from the dead. Dot's voice came first, steady despite the weight behind it. Welcome back. We have a lot to tell you, and you're not going to believe any of it. Sunday morning light filtered through hospital blinds, creating patterns on white walls that seemed too bright, too sharp. My head throbbed with a pain that felt like it lived behind my eyes, and my mouth tasted like metal and cotton. The breathing tube was gone, but my throat still burned from where it had been. Grace squeezed my hand, tears tracking down her face in a way that made alarm bells ring somewhere in my foggy consciousness. Grace didn't cry. Grace was the one who held people together while they fell apart. Seeing her break meant something catastrophic had happened. My voice came out as a croak. What day is it? Sunday. Grace's grip tightened. You've been unconscious for 6 days. 6 days. The number felt impossible. I remembered Wednesday, remembered Natalie driving, asking strange questions, remembered the swerve, the impact, the darkness. Relief flooded through me, warm and overwhelming. The wedding, did we postpone? Silence stretched between them, heavy with something I couldn't name yet. My heart rate picked up. The monitor beside my bed started beeping faster. Grace, did we postpone the wedding? Dot moved closer, her hand finding my shoulder. At 84, her grip still carried the strength of someone who'd spent decades not backing down. No, sweetheart, we didn't. The relief came back, stronger this time. Oh, good. I was worried I'd missed it completely. Wait, did Alex wait for me? Is he okay? Grace made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Dot's hand tightened on my shoulder. Alex is fine. He got married yesterday. The words didn't make a sense. I tried to process them, tried to arrange them into an order that led to meaning, but they kept sliding away from comprehension. I don't understand. How could he get married if I was… Then understanding hit like cold water. He married Natalie. Dot nodded once. Grace dissolved into fresh tears. My brain refused to accept it. Refused to believe that the man who'd held my hand through veteran memorial services, who'd cried when I told him about Thomas, who'd proposed on a beach at sunset like something from a movie, that man couldn't have married my sister while I lay unconscious 6 miles away. That's impossible. Alex loves me. Dot pulled out her iPad with movements that suggested she'd been preparing for this moment, that she'd known exactly how this conversation would go. The screen lit up with images that made my vision blur. Wedding photos, professional ones, beautifully composed and lit. Natalie in my dress, my custom Vera Wang that had been fitted to my body, that had cost more than my first year's Coast Guard salary. She wore it like she'd been born to it, standing beside Alex in his tuxedo, my flowers in her hands, my vows on her lips. My parents walking her down the aisle, both of them, together, smiling like it was the proudest moment of their lives. 200 guests I'd invited. Watching Natalie kiss the man I was supposed to marry. My stomach rebelled. Grace grabbed the bedpan just in time. I vomited until nothing came up but bile and the bitter taste of betrayal. A nurse rushed in, checked my vitals, looked concerned about my blood pressure spiking. The doctor followed, asking questions I couldn't focus on answering. They wanted to sedate me, worried about stress-induced complications. But I forced words past my raw throat. No sedation, I need to understand what happened. The doctor looked at Dot and Grace, clearly weighing patient autonomy against medical caution. Dot's voice carried the authority of 30 years in federal court. Give us 15 minutes. If her vitals don't stabilize, we'll accept sedation. After they left, Dot and Grace told me everything. They spoke in turns, filling in gaps, providing context and evidence. Natalie's manipulation campaign while I was unconscious. The forged power of attorney. The fake medical evaluation. The blessing letter allegedly from me, dated 3 days after the accident, after I was already in a coma. Alex's confusion and grief, exploited by my sister's performance. My parents confirming Natalie's lies, showing him fabricated medical records, convincing him I was mentally unstable. The wedding proceeding as planned. Natalie wearing my dress, speaking my vows, becoming Mrs. Alexander Thornton while I fought to survive traumatic brain injury. Each detail landed like a physical blow. By the time they finished, I understood why Grace had been crying. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic theft of identity, executed with precision while I couldn't defend myself. Show me everything. Dot opened folders on her iPad, organized with the methodical efficiency of a prosecutor building a case. Security footage of Natalie trying on my wedding dress in the hospital bathroom. Audio recordings of family dinners where they discussed replacing me. Bank records showing Natalie's $340,000 debt. Phone logs proving she'd called Alex 47 times during my coma. Text messages between Natalie and my mother, discussing how to handle Alex's doubts. Emails to wedding vendors, changing contact information and authorization forms. A timeline documenting every lie, every forgery, every calculated move. The evidence was damning and thorough. Dot had spent 6 days building an airtight case while I slept. But none of it changed the fundamental truth. They were married. Legally, publicly, witnessed by 200 people. Natalie had won. I need to talk to Alex. Grace's voice came gentle. He's on his honeymoon. The word hit harder than expected. Honeymoon. The Mediterranean cruise I'd planned, the itinerary I'd researched, the excursions I'd booked. Natalie was living all of it with my fiancé, while I lay in a hospital bed trying to process how my family had stolen my life. Where? Greece. They left this morning, 2 weeks aboard a private yacht. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles because it was easier than counting the ways I'd been violated. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Natalie was probably posting honeymoon photos, carefully curated images of her perfect new life built on unconsciousness and fraud. My phone sat on the bedside table, silent. I reached for it with hands that shook, unlocked it to find message notifications I didn't remember getting. 43 voicemails, hundreds of texts. Social media exploding with confusion and congratulations. I pulled up Instagram. Natalie's feed filled my screen with images that felt like someone else's dream bleeding into reality. Her in my dress, her cutting a cake, her dancing with Alex, her holding up a champagne glass with the caption that made my throat close. Finally found my forever. So grateful for this unexpected blessing. Comments flooded beneath each post. Friends asking where I was, Natalie's friends celebrating, distant relatives offering congratulations. And through it all, Natalie performing the role of blushing bride, responding with heart emojis and gratitude, never once mentioning the sister who should have worn that dress. Grace gently took the phone from my hands. Don't torture yourself. But I'd already seen enough. Seen the timestamp on that first post, Saturday at 1:15, right after the ceremony. Natalie hadn't even waited an hour before broadcasting her victory to the world. My phone buzzed in Grace's hand. Unknown number. Grace answered, put it on speaker. Natalie's voice filled the hospital room, bright and breathless. Oh my God, is this Grace? Is Cass awake? I heard she woke up and I just had to call. I found my voice, raw but functional. I'm here. Silence. Then Natalie's tone shifted, saccharine sympathy replacing excitement. Cass, thank God you're okay. We were so worried. The doctor said you might have permanent damage. You married my fiancé. Oh, honey, you're confused. The surgery must have affected your memory. We can explain everything when we get back. You married Alex while I was unconscious from an accident you caused. Her breathing changed, performance slipping for just a moment before clicking back into place. That's not fair. You don't understand what happened, what we had to do for you. For me? You stole my wedding for me? We didn't steal anything. Mom and Dad will explain. You signed papers before the accident. You wanted this. You knew you weren't ready for marriage, that you were still grieving Thomas, that Alex deserved better than someone who was falling apart. Grace grabbed the phone. Stop lying. We have proof, recordings, forged documents, evidence of premeditation. When you get back from your stolen honeymoon, you're going to face fraud charges. Natalie's voice turned cold, all pretense dropping away. Good luck with that. I have a marriage license, 200 witnesses, legal documentation, and a husband who chose to marry me. What do you have? A brain injury and a history of mental instability. She ended the call. I sat in the hospital bed processing what I just heard. Not shock or guilt or even attempts at justification. Just cold calculation and the confidence of someone who thought they'd covered all the angles. Dot's expression suggested she'd expected exactly this response. She thinks she's untouchable. That's going to be her downfall. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Dad. I answered before Grace could stop me. Hello? My father's voice came through irritated, like I'd interrupted something important. Cassandra, I heard you're awake. Thank God. The relief in his voice felt performative, scripted. I waited. Look, I know you're upset right now, but you need to understand we did what was necessary. Necessary? You walked my sister down the aisle to marry my fiancé. We walked Natalie down the aisle to marry a man who needed stability. You weren't well, Cass. You haven't been well since Thomas died. The accusation landed in familiar territory. They'd been suggesting I was unstable since the funeral, interpreting my grief as mental illness, my independence as evidence of incapacity. I had a concussion, not a mental breakdown. You don't see it, do you? That's part of the problem. The impulsive decisions, the inability to maintain stable relationships, the refusal to accept family help. What decisions? What relationships? I've been stable for 3 years. I volunteer at the Veteran Center. I have friends. I was planning a wedding to a man you barely know, just like Thomas. You met him and married him in 6 months. Now Alex, 18 months. Do you see the pattern? Do you see why we're concerned? My hands clenched around the phone. So you decided to give him to Natalie? We decided to ensure Alex wasn't making a mistake, that our family wasn't being embarrassed by another impulsive marriage that would fall apart. So you just transferred him like a subscription service? Don't be dramatic. Natalie understands Alex's world. She can be the partner he needs. You would have resented the lifestyle, pulled away from the social obligations, isolated him from his network the way you isolated yourself from us. Each word felt designed to provoke, to make me react emotionally so they could point to my instability as proof. I forced my voice level. Where are you right now? Hesitation. We're still in Charleston. We stayed for the reception. But not to visit your daughter in the hospital. We were told you were unconscious. What would visiting accomplish? Human decency? Parental concern? Any indication that you care whether I live or die? That's unfair. We care deeply. That's why we made the hard choice to support Natalie instead of enabling your self-destructive patterns. I closed my eyes, counted to 5, opened them. Did you help plan the accident? What? No, how can you even… The seatbelt was cut. The airbag was disconnected. Natalie made a phone call right before impact saying, "It's done." So I'll ask again. Did you help plan the accident that put me in this hospital? Silence stretched across the line. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been fear. We had nothing to do with any accident. If Natalie did something, that's on her. We simply made the best of a difficult situation. By stealing my wedding? By preventing a disaster. And now you need to be smart about this. If you make trouble, if you try to annul the marriage or press charges, you're going to look vindictive, unstable. You'll prove everything we've been saying about your mental state. The threat landed cleanly. They'd built a narrative where my resistance to being victimized would be used as evidence of mental illness. I'm hanging up now. Cassandra, listen to me. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. Grace took the phone gently, set it aside. Your father is a piece of work. Dot's expression suggested she was already adding that conversation to her evidence file. He's protecting himself, setting up plausible deniability. But the phone records don't lie. We'll prove coordination. A knock at the door brought a hospital administrator, apologetic and professional. She needed to discuss my bill, insurance authorizations, discharge planning. Grace handled it while I stared at the ceiling and tried to reconcile the life I'd woken up to with the life I'd had 6 days ago. When the administrator left, I turned to Dot. "What's the plan?" Her eyes sharpened with the focus of someone who'd been waiting for that exact question. "First, you recover. Second, we document everything. Third, we build a legal strategy. Fourth, we destroy them." In that order? Exactly in that order. Rushing leads to mistakes. They've already made theirs. Now we collect them like evidence. Grace pulled out her laptop, opened a folder that contained hours of compiled documentation. Bank records showing attempts to access my accounts. Credit applications in my name. The forged power of attorney with my signature that didn't quite match. Medical evaluations from doctors who didn't exist. But one document made my blood run cold. A letter handwritten on my personal stationery. My cream-colored paper with my monogram. My handwriting, or close enough to fool most people. Dated April 15th. Grace read it aloud, her voice tight with anger. "If anything should happen to me before my wedding to Alexander Thornton, I want my sister Natalie to take my place." The letter continued, outlining doubts I'd never had, fears I'd never expressed, a blessing I'd never given. It was elaborate and detailed and completely fabricated. But the date was the smoking gun. April 15th, 3 days after the accident, 3 days into my coma. I'd been unconscious when this letter was allegedly written. Natalie had forged my handwriting, my signature, my supposed wishes. Then she'd had it notarized by someone willing to backdate the stamp. "This proves fraud," Dot nodded. Among other things, the notary's license was already suspended for fraudulent practices. They got sloppy with the timeline. Alex's lawyer caught it, but by then the wedding was hours away. And he went through with it anyway. Neither of them had an answer for that. Alex's choice to proceed despite evidence of forgery was its own kind of betrayal, separate from my family's calculated theft. 3 days passed in a blur of medical tests and legal consultations. Dot brought in Marcus Webb, a lawyer who'd prosecuted federal fraud cases before retiring to private practice. He reviewed everything with the precision of someone who'd seen every angle criminals thought they could hide. His assessment was clinical and thorough. The marriage was legally valid unless we could prove fraud and inducement. That meant demonstrating Alex had been deliberately deceived about material facts. The forged letter helped, but proving Natalie's intent required more. He outlined our options: criminal charges, fraud, forgery, identity theft, possibly attempted murder depending on accident investigation results, civil suit, annulment, theft, conversion, intentional infliction of emotional distress, time required, months, possibly years, cost, hundreds of thousands in legal fees. But we can win? Marcus's eyes carried the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case he shouldn't have. We can win. The question is what winning looks like to you. I thought about that. Winning meant annulment, criminal convictions, public exposure of what they'd done. But it also meant months or years living in the shadow of this betrayal. Every legal proceeding reopening wounds. Every court appearance reminding me that my family had valued money over my life. I want everything. The marriage annulled, criminal charges filed, assets returned, and I want to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. Marcus nodded once. Then that's what we'll pursue. On my 4th day in the hospital, Dot arrived with new information. She'd hired a private investigator, Diana Torres, who specialized in financial fraud. Diana had spent 72 hours following digital trails and paper records, building a timeline of theft that went back further than any of us had realized. Diana spread printouts across my hospital bed, bank statements showing Natalie had attempted to access my accounts multiple times over the past year, blocked each time by 2-factor authentication. Credit card applications in my name, opened and maxed out, collections notices for debts I'd never incurred. She's been trying to steal from you for at least 18 months. The evidence painted a picture of systematic, premeditated identity theft. Natalie hadn't just seen an opportunity when I had the accident. She'd been building toward this, laying groundwork, testing boundaries. Then Diana showed me the house records. My Charleston home, the one Thomas and I had bought and renovated together, had been entered 4 times during my coma, Security footage I'd installed after a neighborhood break-in showed Natalie using a key I'd never given her, systematically removing items. My backup wedding dress, jewelry Alex had given me, documents from my safe, photo albums containing pictures of me and Alex, personal items that had sentimental value, all of it gone. But the worst was what she'd left behind. Legal documents filed with the county recorder, transferring my deed of trust to her name. Documentation claiming I'd signed over the property in consideration of family care during incapacity. My house, the place Thomas and I had built our life, stolen with forged paperwork while I fought to survive. Is it legal? Diana's expression said everything. The documents are filed. Challenging them requires proving forgery and fraud, which we can do, but it takes time. I called my bank from the hospital bed. The automated system cheerfully informed me my checking account balance was $47.23. My savings account, which had held Thomas's life insurance money and my military pension buyout, was showing an error. A human representative came on the line, professionally sympathetic. Ms. Morrison, there's a hold on your account pending resolution of disputed transactions. What disputed transactions? 3 wire transfers totaling $180,000 from your joint account with Alexander Thornton. The receiving account flagged them as suspicious. The joint account Alex and I had opened for wedding expenses. Natalie had cleaned it out. I didn't authorize those transfers. I understand. However, our records show the transfers were initiated with proper authentication and security codes. Reversing them requires proof of unauthorized access. Of course it did. Natalie had my phone during the coma, had access to my authentication apps, my security codes, my entire digital life. More calls revealed more theft. 3 credit cards I'd never applied for, all maxed out at $75,000 total. A car title transfer for my vehicle. Utilities at my house switched to Natalie's name. Every system I'd built for financial security, every protection I'd put in place, had been methodically dismantled while I was unconscious. Grace found me that evening staring at my laptop, scrolling through evidence of my own financial demolition. She didn't say anything, just sat beside the bed and waited. They took everything. Not everything. They can't take who you are, what you've accomplished. 30 years in the Coast Guard, lived seed, a career built on strength and competence. Her voice steadied. Money can be recovered, houses can be reclaimed, but they can't steal your identity. Not the real one. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that Cassandra Morrison, the woman who'd commanded rescue operations in Category 4 hurricanes, was still intact somewhere under the layers of violation and theft. But right now I just felt hollow. Dot arrived that evening with Marcus Webb and a new piece of information that changed everything. The prenup. My confusion must have shown, because Marcus pulled out documents with the kind of careful handling that suggested they were explosive. When you and Alex drew up your prenuptial agreement, it specified that if the marriage lasted 5 years, you'd be entitled to $45 million in settlement. If Alex died first, $150 million inheritance. I nodded. I'd insisted on the prenup to protect Alex from accusations that I was marrying him for money. The generous terms had been his idea. His way of showing he valued what I brought to the marriage beyond financial assets. Marcus laid out new documents. Natalie signed a prenup, same terms, dated Saturday night, filed Monday morning. The room tilted. He just transferred my prenup to her? Legally, yes. He's entitled to set terms for his own marriage, and since he thought he was honoring your wishes, thought you'd given your blessing. He saw it as maintaining the agreement rather than replacing you. $45 million. That's what my unconscious body was worth to my sister. Not my life, not my happiness, just the dollar amount she could extract if she kept Alex married for 5 years. Can we challenge it? Marcus's expression carried calculated optimism. We can challenge the entire marriage. If we prove fraud and inducement, the prenup becomes void along with everything else. But that's why they're so confident. They think the legal marriage, witnessed and documented, protects them. Dot's voice cut through with prosecutor's precision. Then we prove them wrong. She pulled out her phone, opened files I'd seen before, the recorded family dinners. But now she played new sections, recordings from dates going back months. 6 months before my accident. Natalie's voice clear and calculating. If only Cass would just disappear for a while. Just take herself out of the equation. 4 months before. My mother responding, she's always been the golden child, military service, widow's benefits, now a billionaire fiancé. What have any of us gotten? 2 months before. My father. If Cass would just share some of that wealth instead of hoarding it all for herself. Natalie. I don't need her charity. I need her to step aside. Then the recording from 3 months before the accident. Natalie's voice dropping to conspiratorial. What if something happened to Cass? Would Alex wait? My mother. Rich men don't stay single long. Natalie. So if she had an accident and I was there to comfort him? My father. Now you're thinking strategically. The recordings continued, planning discussions disguised as family concern. Natalie researching Alex's social circle, his business interests, his preferences. My parents coaching her on how to present herself, how to position the replacement as honoring my wishes rather than stealing my life. But the most damning recording came from 2 days before the accident. Natalie on the phone with someone, her voice low but distinct. Tomorrow, the courthouse run. Make sure the car's ready. Passenger airbag off. I'll handle the rest. A male voice. You're sure about this? Natalie. I'm sure. It's time. The recording ended. I stared at Dot. She planned it. She planned the accident. We believe the other voice is David Chen, Natalie's husband. He's a mechanic. He had access to your sister's rental car. We're working on proving he disabled the safety features. Marcus made notes with the speed of someone building a criminal case. This is conspiracy to commit attempted murder. This changes everything. My hands had gone numb. I'd known on some level that the accident wasn't random, that Natalie's swerve had been deliberate. But hearing her plan it, hearing the premeditation in her voice, made it real in a way that surveillance footage and accident reports hadn't. My sister had tried to kill me, not in a moment of rage or passion, not in an accident that went wrong. She'd planned it, prepared the car, chose the location, executed it with precision designed to look like a tragic deer strike. And when I survived, when I woke up with nothing worse than a skull fracture and temporary unconsciousness, she'd adapted. Used my recovery time to steal everything else she'd been planning to take anyway. We need to tell the police. Dot's hand found mine. Already done. Diana filed a report this morning. Detective Sarah Kim is assigned to the case. She's reviewing the evidence now. Everything was moving fast. Pieces clicking into place with the efficiency of people who knew how to build airtight cases. But underneath the legal strategy and evidence compilation, I felt something colder growing. Rage. Not the hot, explosive kind that made people scream and throw things. The cold, calculated fury that came from understanding exactly how you'd been violated and making a decision about what to do with that knowledge. They wanted me silent, wanted me to accept the theft, to go quietly, to disappear into whatever narrative they'd built about my mental instability. Instead, I was going to destroy them. Marcus outlined our strategy. Criminal complaints filed with multiple agencies, civil suit for annulment and damages, restraining orders to prevent asset dissipation, media strategy to control the narrative before Natalie could spin it. This is going to be public, very public. Your sister married a billionaire. That makes it news. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. Thought about my name in headlines, my face on social media, strangers picking apart my life and judging whether I deserve sympathy or scorn. I spent 30 years in the Coast Guard. I've rescued people from hurricanes. I've faced down bureaucracy and sexism and every obstacle they could throw at someone who didn't fit their image of what a female officer should be. I can handle publicity. Marcus smiled. Then let's begin. The hospital discharged me on day 7. I went home to Dot's house, not willing to fight for access to my own home, while Natalie's forged documents claimed ownership. Dot had converted her guest room into a war room, dining table covered with evidence folders and legal documents. Grace stayed, taking leave from work to help coordinate. Diana Torres worked from a laptop in the corner, following digital trails and building financial timelines. Marcus reviewed documents with the focus of someone who understood that every word mattered in court. We worked 18-hour days, building the case that would become the foundation of everything that followed. 2 weeks after the wedding, Natalie and Alex returned from their honeymoon. Diana had been tracking their location through social media posts and credit card records. She called me when their private plane landed in Charleston. They're back, landed at noon, should be at Thornton's penthouse within the hour. I'd been preparing for this moment, but my hands still shook as I pulled on clothes and told Grace I needed to go somewhere. Where? To see them, to see it. I need to look at what they took and remember why I'm doing this. Grace drove. Dot came too, both of them understanding that I needed witnesses, Needed people who would catch me if seeing Alex with Natalie broke something I couldn't repair. The penthouse where I should have been living sat in Charleston's most exclusive building, all glass and steel and views that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. I'd been there once with Alex, touring the space where we'd planned to start our married life. Now I stood on the sidewalk across the street, looking up at windows that glowed with late afternoon light. Diana had texted updates, paparazzi at the airport, Natalie clinging to Alex, performing for cameras, social media posts resuming, honeymoon highlight reels carefully curated to project perfect happiness. I watched the building entrance, watched them arrive in Alex's car, Natalie laughing at something he said, both of them tan and relaxed from 2 weeks in Mediterranean sun. They looked happy, or at least they looked like people who were supposed to be happy, hitting all the right visual markers of newlywed bliss. Then I saw movement in the penthouse windows. Natalie, pacing with a phone to her ear, then rushing to another room, her movements sharp with agitation. My phone buzzed. Text from Diana. Hospital called her. Confirmed you're awake and recovering. She knows you know. I watched Natalie appear in the window again, this time gesturing dramatically at someone out of view. Alex, probably. Telling him some version of events designed to make me look unstable, vengeful, dangerous. Grace touched my shoulder. We should go. But I couldn't look away. Couldn't stop watching my sister inhabit the life she'd stolen, performing the role of Mrs. Alexander Thornton in the home that should have been mine. Natalie came to the window, looked down at the street. For a moment, I thought she saw me. Thought our eyes met across distance and glass. She raised a champagne glass in a toast, smiled, turned away. That's when something in me went completely cold. Not broken, not devastated, just clear and sharp and absolutely certain. Grace's voice came quiet. What are you thinking? I'm thinking she just made a mistake. She thinks because she got the ceremony, the legal paperwork, the honeymoon that she's won. She thinks I'll back down, accept defeat, disappear quietly. Will you? I turned away from the building, from the window where my sister celebrated her theft. No, I'm going to take everything back. The marriage, the money, my house, my life, all of it. Dot's expression carried grim satisfaction. Good, because Marcus called while we were driving. The judge approved an emergency hearing. Monday morning, Alex has been served. That meant Alex knew I was awake, knew I was fighting, knew the legal machinery was already in motion. Does he want to talk? His lawyer called Marcus. He wants to meet. Tomorrow. Private. Just you and him. My heart did something complicated. Part hope, part dread, part anger that he thought a conversation could fix what he'd done. Where? Neutral ground. Marcus's office. He'll have the meeting recorded for evidence purposes, but it's not a deposition, just a conversation. I thought about seeing Alex again. Thought about facing the man who'd held my hand 6 days before the accident, who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, who'd chosen to marry my sister instead of waiting to see if I'd recover. Tell him yes, tomorrow afternoon I'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Grace had crashed in Dot's spare room, exhausted from weeks of hospital vigils and legal preparation. Dot had gone to bed hours ago. The house was silent except for my thoughts. I pulled out my laptop, opened the folder of evidence we'd compiled, stared at wedding photos until they lost meaning and became just patterns of light and fabric and stolen moments. My phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. This is Alex. I know you're probably not ready to talk, but I need you to know I'm sorry for everything. I should have waited. I should have trusted you. I failed you in every way that mattered. Tomorrow, I'll explain everything. I just hope you'll listen. I stared at the message for a long time. Thought about responding with anger, with accusations, with all the hurt and betrayal that had been building for 7 days. Instead, I wrote back, I'll listen, but listening doesn't mean forgiving. See you tomorrow. His response came immediately. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just need you to understand what happened, what they made me believe. They didn't make you do anything. You chose. Own that. Long pause. Then, you're right. I chose, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. I turned off my phone. Couldn't handle more tonight. Couldn't process the complicated feelings that came with Alex's apology, with the knowledge that part of me still loved the man who'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. Tomorrow would be hard enough. Tomorrow I'd face the man I was supposed to marry and demand answers for why he'd married my sister instead. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of taking back everything they'd stolen. Tomorrow, I'd show them all that Cassandra Morrison didn't break. She adapted. She survived. and she made damn sure that anyone who thought they could destroy her learned exactly how wrong they'd been. I walked into that conference room wearing my Coast Guard dress uniform. Medals, ribbons, the works. Alex's face went white. Natalie wasn't there. He'd asked to see me alone. And for the first time since I woke up, I saw something in his eyes I recognized. Doubt. Sunday afternoon. Marcus Webb's law office occupied the top floor of a building overlooking Charleston Harbor. The conference room was all glass and polished wood, designed to intimidate opponents and reassure clients. I was neither. Alex stood when I entered, then seemed to forget what to do with his hands. He looked thinner than I remembered, shadows under his eyes suggesting sleep hadn't come easily on his stolen honeymoon. I sat across the conference table, put my hands flat on the surface, waited. His voice came out rough. You're okay. Did you think I wouldn't be? Natalie said you had severe brain damage, that you might never be the same person. Do I look brain damaged to you? He finally met my eyes. Something in his expression crumbled. No, you look exactly like yourself. Then why did you marry my sister 6 days after I almost died? The question hung between us, sharp and unavoidable. Alex sank into his chair like the weight of it had finally caught up to him. I don't have a good answer. I have reasons, but they're not good enough. Try me. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then slid it across the table. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, hospital admissions, all with my name, all documenting a history of mental illness I'd never had. Your parents showed me these, day 2 of your coma. They said you'd been hiding your condition, that Thomas's death had triggered a breakdown you'd been covering up for years. I looked at the documents, recognized the hospital names, all legitimate Charleston facilities, recognized the doctor signatures, all real physicians. The forgery was sophisticated, professional, expensive. None of this is real. I know that now. But then? His hands clenched. Your parents were so convincing. They had answers for every question. They showed me prescription records, therapy notes, emergency room visits. They made it seem like everyone knew except me. You could have called my doctor, my actual doctor. I tried. They said patient confidentiality prevented them from confirming or denying, that only family could access your records. He looked away. I was grieving. You were unconscious. They were there and you weren't, and I was scared. So you believed them over waiting for me? Yes. The word came out flat. I chose the easier path, the one where I didn't have to sit with uncertainty and fear, where someone gave me answers even if those answers were lies. I pulled out my own phone, opened the folder Dot had compiled, played the recording of Natalie's voice 2 days before the accident. Tomorrow, the courthouse run, make sure the car is ready. Alex's face went from pale to gray. That's Natalie, planning the accident that put me in the coma your decision was based on. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she... But you chose to believe them over trusting me. That's the part I can't get past. 6 days, Alex. You couldn't wait 6 days to see if I'd wake up. His voice broke. They said you'd left a letter, that you'd anticipated this, that you wanted Natalie to take your place if anything happened. I slid the forged blessing letter across the table. Dated April 15th, 3 days after the accident. I was unconscious when this was allegedly written. He stared at the date like he was seeing it for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe he'd been so desperate for permission to move forward that he hadn't looked closely at the timeline. Why didn't your lawyer catch this? She did. Called me the morning of the wedding, told me the notary was fraudulent, the date was impossible, the whole thing was fabricated. His hands covered his face, and I went through with it anyway. The admission landed heavier than accusations. He knew. Before the ceremony, before the vows, before he kissed my sister and made it legal. He knew it was built on fraud. Why? Because I was a coward. Because turning back meant admitting I'd been manipulated. Meant facing you when you woke up and explaining why I doubted you. Meant being alone again. He looked up, eyes red. And because Natalie was there, crying and desperate and telling me she loved me, that she'd always loved me, that she could make me happy if I'd just give her a chance. Do you love her? No. Did you sleep with her? The silence answered before he did. Yes, on the wedding night. I was drunk. I hated myself before, during, and after. The pain was sharp and immediate. Knowing it intellectually was different from hearing him confirm it. My fiancé had consummated a marriage with my sister while I lay in a hospital bed 6 miles away. Did you think about me while you were with her? His voice came out barely above a whisper. I tried not to. That's worse, isn't it? That I actively tried to forget you so I could go through with it. I stood, paced to the window, looked out at Charleston Harbor where Alex had proposed to me 9 months ago, where he'd gotten down on one knee at sunset and promised forever. This is what's going to happen. You're going to annul this marriage. You're going to testify against her in court. You're going to cooperate fully with every investigation. And you're going to stay away from me. Cass, please. I'm not done. I turned back to face him. You made a choice. You chose fear over faith. You chose the comfortable lie over waiting for the difficult truth. And you can't take that back by saying you're sorry. I know. But I need you to understand that I still love you. That marrying Natalie doesn't change what I feel. That's your problem, not mine. His expression shifted from pleading to something closer to resignation. What happens now? Now we go to court. We expose what Natalie did. We prove the fraud. We dissolve the marriage you never should have entered. I moved toward the door. And then you live with what you've done. You don't get to feel better because I forgave you. You don't get closure. You just get to know that when I needed you most, you weren't there. Cass, one more thing. I paused at the door. Don't contact me again unless it's through lawyers. We're not friends. We're not anything. You're just the man I was going to marry who chose to marry my sister instead. I walked out, made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking, made it to Grace's car before the tears came. Grace drove without asking questions, held my hand when we stopped at red lights, understood that sometimes the only thing you could do for someone was be present while they fell apart. By the time we got back to Dot's house, I'd cried myself empty, sat in the car staring at nothing while Grace waited. Did it help seeing him? Yes and no. I got answers, but they don't make it hurt less. Do you still love him? I thought about that. Thought about the man who'd proposed to me versus the man who'd married my sister. They felt like different people, separated by choices and consequences. I love who I thought he was, but that person doesn't exist. So no, I don't love him anymore. I just miss the version of my life where he was someone I could trust. Grace squeezed my hand. That's allowed. Missing what you thought you had. Monday morning arrived with rain. I wore a black suit to court, professional and severe. Dot had coached me on courtroom demeanor, calm, composed, factual. Let the evidence speak. Don't react to provocation. Marcus met us in the courthouse lobby. Alex's lawyer filed a petition to annul based on fraud and inducement. That helps our case significantly. The judge is Helena Blackwood, former Navy JAG. She won't tolerate deception. We walked through security, past journalists who'd gotten wind of the case. Billionaire's wedding fraud. Society bride exposed. The headlines were writing themselves. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling and fluorescent lights, and the kind of impersonal efficiency that came from processing human drama like paperwork. Natalie sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, Jonathan Pierce. She'd dressed for sympathy. Soft colors, minimal makeup, hair pulled back like a penitent. When our eyes met, she smiled, small and sharp and absolutely confident. My parents sat in this gallery behind her. They didn't acknowledge me. Judge Blackwood entered. Everyone stood. She was 70, compact and fierce, with eyes that suggested she'd seen every possible human failing and wasn't impressed by any of them. Be seated. This is an emergency hearing regarding petition for annulment in the matter of Thornton versus Morrison Thornton. Mr. Webb, you filed the emergency petition? Marcus stood. Your Honor, we're here because my client, Cassandra Morrison, was the victim of identity theft, fraud, and attempted murder that culminated in her sister marrying her fiancé, while my client was in a medically induced coma. Pierce stood immediately. Objection. These are serious criminal allegations that have not been proven. I'm aware of what's been proven and what hasn't, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Webb, present your evidence. Marcus pulled up the first document on the courtroom screen. The forged power of attorney with my signature that didn't quite match. The fake medical evaluation from a doctor who didn't exist. The blessing letter dated after the accident. These documents were used to convince Alexander Thornton that Ms. Morrison had given her blessing for her sister to take her place. All three are fraudulent. All three were created while Ms. Morrison was unconscious. Pierce stood again. My client acted in good faith. These documents were provided by Ms. Morrison's parents, who had legitimate concern for their daughter's mental state. Based on what evidence? Pierce pulled out the psychiatric records, the same fabricated history Alex had been shown. Dot leaned forward beside me, making notes. Marcus requested the medical board investigator. A tired-looking woman in a gray suit took the stand, confirmed that every doctor listed in the psychiatric records denied treating me, that several signatures appeared forged, that the whole file was fraudulent. So Ms. Morrison has no history of mental illness? None that we can verify. Her actual medical records show a healthy woman who sought grief counseling after her husband's death. That's not mental illness. That's normal grief. Pierce tried to recover. Even if the records are questionable, the fact remains that Cassandra Morrison showed concerning behavior, impulsive marriage decisions, social isolation. I leaned forward to Marcus. Let me respond. He nodded. Requested permission for me to testify briefly. Judge Blackwood gestured. Ms. Morrison, approach. I stood, walked to the witness stand, raised my hand for oath. The clerk's voice was flat and practiced. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, Marcus began. Ms. Morrison, Mr. Pierce characterized your marriage to Thomas Morrison as impulsive. Can you explain the timeline? I met Thomas at a veterans charity event. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. We were married 3 months later, after his deployment schedule changed, and we wanted to ensure military benefits covered us both. Our marriage lasted 5 years until his death in a training accident. Does that sound impulsive to you, Your Honor? Blackwood's expression was unreadable. Continue. And your engagement to Alexander Thornton? We met at a similar event 18 months ago. Dated for 15 months before he proposed. Set a wedding date 3 months out to allow time for proper planning. That's not impulsive. That's normal. Pierce stood for cross-examination. But you have no children, correct? Never wanted them? Correct. Thomas and I decided together that children weren't part of our life plan. That's a choice, not a mental illness. And after his death, you isolated yourself from family. I maintained regular contact with my grandmother and close friends. I established boundaries with parents who insisted I should remarry quickly and have children to give them grandchildren. That's not isolation, that's self-preservation. Pierce's expression tightened. You accuse my client of fraud, but isn't it true that you've always been jealous of her? That she had children while you didn't? That she needed financial help while you had military benefits? Marcus objected. Relevance. I'm establishing motive for these accusations. Judge Blackwood leaned forward. Mr. Pierce, your client married Miss Morrison's fiancé while she was unconscious from an accident. The question isn't Miss Morrison's feelings about her sister. It's whether fraud occurred. The marriage was legal, witnessed, documented. My client believed she was acting with Ms. Morrison's blessing. Marcus played the security footage. Natalie trying on my wedding dress during my coma. Natalie whispering threats to my unconscious body. Natalie removing items from my home. The courtroom went silent. Then Marcus played the audio. Natalie's voice planning the accident. The conversation about disabling safety features. The timeline proving premeditation. Natalie stood, face flushed. That's taken out of context. Judge Blackwood's voice cut through. Sit down, Ms. Thornton. Don't call me that. My name is Morrison.
Your name is what the court determines it to be. Sit down.
Natalie sat, but her hands were shaking. The composed performance was cracking. Marcus called Alex to testify. He walked to the stand looking like he hadn't slept. His lawyer, Sarah Goldstein, gave him an encouraging nod. Mr. Thornton, when did you decide to marry Natalie Morrison? I didn't decide. It was decided for me. Explain. Alex described the manipulation timeline. Day 2 of my coma, Natalie showing him fake medical reports. Day 3, the forged blessing letter. Day 4, my parents cornering him with threats. Day 5, pressure intensifying. Day 6, morning of the wedding, his lawyer calling with proof of fraud. And you proceeded anyway? Yes, his voice barely carried. I proceeded anyway. Why? Because I was grieving and scared and they made it seem like honoring Cass's wishes. Because backing out meant facing that I'd been manipulated. Because Natalie was there offering an easy answer. He looked at me for the first time. And because I was a coward who chose the comfortable lie over the difficult wait. Pierce stood for cross. But you knowingly married a different woman than intended? Yes. You consummated the marriage? Yes. Then this is a valid marriage and my client is entitled to the prenuptial agreement terms. Marcus objected. Marriage validity isn't determined solely by consummation. Fraud vitiates consent. Judge Blackwood made a note. Mr. Thornton, did you love Natalie Morrison when you married her? No, Your Honor. Do you love her now? No. Did you at any point believe you were marrying Cassandra Morrison? No, I knew I was marrying Natalie, but I believed Cassandra had given permission, had wanted this. And when did you discover that wasn't true? When my lawyer called the morning of the wedding with proof the blessing letter was forged. And then fully when Cassandra woke up, and I saw there was no brain damage, no mental illness, nothing that justified what I'd done. Natalie's lawyer called her next. She took the stand with perfect posture, tear-streaked face, the picture of wronged innocence. Mrs. Morrison, why did you marry Alexander Thornton? Because I loved my sister. Because I wanted to honor her wishes. Because she'd always struggled with commitment, and I knew she was having doubts about the wedding. Marcus stood. Objection. No evidence supports any of those statements. I'll rephrase. What made you believe your sister wanted you to marry her fiancé? She told me, during our drive before the accident, she said she wasn't sure she could go through with it, that she loved Alex, but was afraid of making another mistake like with Thomas. Objection. The witness is unconscious and cannot refute this testimony. Judge Blackwood looked at Natalie. Is there any documentation of this conversation? No, Your Honor, it was private. Convenient. Blackwood made a note. Continue. Pierce walked Natalie through her version of events. The caring sister helping plan the wedding, the tragic accident, the devastating realization that her sister might not recover, the difficult choice to step in and save Alex from heartbreak. It was a masterful performance. Natalie cried at the right moments, composed herself when needed, projected wounded dignity throughout. Then Marcus stood for cross-examination. Ms. Morrison Thornton, you've testified that you acted out of love for your sister. Is that correct? Yes. Then can you explain why you researched marriage by proxy and guardian of incapacitated adult 2 months before the accident? Natalie's expression flickered. I don't recall. Marcus displayed her search history, dates, times, queries, all pointing to planning. Can you explain why you attempted to access your sister's bank account 17 times over the past year? I was trying to help her manage accounts she didn't give you access to? Accounts protected by two-factor authentication you tried to bypass. I was concerned about her finances. Concerned enough to open credit cards in her name, to max them out, to file fraudulent property transfers on her home? Pierce objected. Your Honor, these allegations are backed by evidence already submitted to this court. I'll allow it. Marcus pulled up the financial records. Every attempted theft, every forged document, every systematic violation of my identity. Natalie's composure was slipping. I was trying to protect family assets. Family assets? This is your sister's money. Her house, her life. How is stealing it protection? She didn't deserve it! The words burst out before Natalie could stop them. She didn't deserve any of it! The courtroom went silent. Natalie realized what she'd said, tried to backtrack. I meant, she didn't deserve to suffer. I was trying to help. But Marcus had the opening. You said she didn't deserve it. Deserve what? The money? The fiancé? The life you decided belonged to you? That's not what You had everything handed to you. The military career, the pension, the husband who worshipped you, the perfect life. And what did I get? Natalie was standing now, voice rising. 2 kids I had to raise alone because my husband left, a house I'm losing to foreclosure, debt I can't pay. So you decided to take mine? You don't even need it. You have no kids, no one to leave it to. It would have ended up with the government or some charity. At least my children would have benefited. Pierce was trying to pull her back to her seat. Natalie, don't. And you were unconscious. You wouldn't have even known. If you just stayed in that coma a little longer, it would have all been done and legal, and you could have lived in a nice care facility and been taken care of. Every word landed like a confession. Judge Blackwood's expression had gone from neutral to cold. You wanted her to stay in a coma? Natalie seemed to realize the courtroom was staring at her. I just meant if she couldn't recover. Dot stood in the gallery. Your Honor, may I approach? Who are you? Dorothy Morrison. I'm Cassandra's grandmother, and the person who's been documenting this family's crimes for the past 3 years. Blackwood gestured her forward. Dot walked with the confidence of someone who'd spent 30 years owning courtrooms. She pulled out her phone, played the recording from 2 days before my accident. Natalie's voice clear and distinct. Tomorrow, the courthouse run, make sure the car is ready. The courtroom erupted. Pierce was objecting. Natalie was shouting that the recording was illegal. My parents were trying to leave. Judge Blackwood's gavel cracked like thunder. Everyone sit down and be quiet. Silence fell. Mrs. Morrison, is this recording legally obtained? Yes, Your Honor. South Carolina is a one-party consent state. I recorded my own conversations at family dinners. Everything is admissible. Play the rest. Dot played every damning conversation. Natalie discussing replacement strategies. My parents coaching her. The premeditation laid bare an audio that couldn't be explained away. When it ended, Blackwood looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, approach. They walked forward like prisoners approaching sentencing. Did you help your daughter forge documents? My father tried to deflect. We were trying to help. Answer yes or no. Silence. Did you provide false medical records to Mr. Thornton? My mother's voice came out small. We thought we were protecting the family. By defrauding your other daughter by helping steal her fiancé? Natalie needed help. She was desperate. Cassandra has always been fine on her own. So you sacrificed one daughter for the other? Neither of them answered. Judge Blackwood turned to the court recorder. I want everything Mrs. Morrison just played entered into evidence. I'm referring this entire matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. She looked at Natalie. Ms. Thornton or Morrison, or whatever you want to call yourself, you're being detained pending arraignment. Bailiff, take her into custody. Natalie tried to run, made it 3 steps before bailiffs caught her. She was screaming about unfairness, about being set up, about how this was all my fault. I sat perfectly still, watching my sister be handcuffed and removed from the courtroom. Judge Blackwood granted the annulment, declared the marriage void from inception, invalidated the prenuptial agreement Natalie had signed, issued restraining orders preventing further asset dissipation. Ms. Morrison, I'm sorry for what you've endured. The court recognizes that you were victimized by people who should have protected you. Justice will be slow, but it will come. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed. Marcus handled them with practiced efficiency, while Grace and Dot shepherded me to the car. My phone exploded with notifications. Social media erupting, news outlets picking up the story, public opinion shifting as details emerged. But I turned it all off, sat in the back of Dot's car and just breathed. It's done. Dot's voice came from the front seat. The marriage is annulled. Natalie's in custody. Your parents will face charges. It's done. But it didn't feel done. It felt like the beginning of a different kind of pain. The aftermath, the rebuilding, the learning to live with what had been taken and what could never be returned. 6 months later, I stood in my reclaimed house. The property transfer had been reversed, the stolen items returned, the financial accounts restored. Natalie had been convicted. 8 years for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. David Chen got 5 for his role in disabling the car. My parents got 2 years house arrest and probation for being accessories. Alex had paid my legal fees without being asked. $340,000 to undo the damage his choice had enabled. He'd sent one letter, apologizing again, saying he understood I'd never forgive him but hoped I'd heal. I didn't respond. Some wounds didn't need closure. They just needed time. Grace had moved into the guest house behind my property. We'd started a foundation together, helping victims of family fraud navigate legal and emotional recovery. The Morrison Foundation, named for the family that destroyed me and the grandmother who saved me. Dot still lived with me. At 84, she was sharper than most lawyers half her age. She ran the foundation's legal clinic, teaching survivors how to document abuse and build cases. I'd started dating again. Another Coast Guard veteran, someone who understood service and loss and the complicated process of rebuilding trust. Nothing serious yet, just coffee and conversations and the possibility that maybe, eventually, I could believe in forever again. Natalie's daughters reached out 6 months into her sentence. Both of them apologized. Both wanted relationships separate from their mother. Emma was 28 now, Lucas 26. They'd changed their last names to Morrison Wells, their maternal grandmother's name. I hired Emma to work at the foundation. She had her mother's organizational skills without her mother's sociopathic tendencies. Lucas visited monthly, bringing Dot her favorite pastries and listening to stories about the case. My parents tried to contact me once, a letter explaining they'd only wanted to help Natalie, that they'd made a mistake, that they missed me. I burned it. Some relationships couldn't survive what had been done. Some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive. And that was okay. I didn't need to forgive them to move forward. 1 year after the wedding, that wasn't mine. I stood at the Veteran Community Center where I'd collapsed. The same room, the same stage, but this time I was cutting ribbon on a new wing. The Morrison Thomas Memorial Hall, named for my grandmother's maiden name and my late husband, funded by the settlement from Alex. $45 million he'd agreed to pay voluntarily, the same amount Natalie would have gotten from the fraudulent prenup. I used it to build something better than what they'd tried to destroy. My speech was short. A year ago, I collapsed in this room. I woke up to discover that the people I trusted most had betrayed me in ways I'm still processing. But I also discovered something else. I looked at Grace, at Dot, at the veterans filling the hall. I discovered that family isn't defined by biology. It's defined by loyalty, by showing up, by standing beside you when you're at your weakest, not taking advantage of it. Emma stood in the back with Lucas, both crying, both understanding what it meant to choose differently than the parents who raised them. To everyone who's experienced betrayal from those who should have protected you, your pain is valid. Your anger is justified, and your strength in choosing to rebuild? That's not just recovery, that's revolution. The crowd applauded. I stepped down from the podium and walked through the hall, past photos documenting our first year of work. 200 families helped, $8 million in fraudulent assets recovered, 17 convictions secured. Natalie had wanted me to disappear quietly, to accept being stolen from, to vanish into whatever narrative served her needs. Instead, I woke up. I fought back, and I built something that would outlast every lie they told about me. Grace found me looking at the final photo, the courtroom sketch of Natalie being led away in handcuffs. You could take that down. You don't need to remember. I want to remember, not because it makes me angry, because it reminds me what I survived. That night, I sat on my porch watching Charleston Harbor, the same view where Alex had proposed. But it didn't hurt anymore. It was just water and sunset, and the promise that life continued whether you were ready or not. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "This is Alex. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I saw the news about the memorial hall, what you've built from the ashes of what I helped destroy. It's incredible. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you. You did exactly what I knew you'd do. You survived what tried to destroy you, and made damn sure no one else would have to face it alone." I stared at the message for a long time, thought about responding, thought about ignoring it, finally typed, "Thank you. I hope you've learned something from all this." His response came quickly. "I learned that fear makes cowards of us all, and that some choices can't be undone, only lived with. I hope you find happiness, Cass. Real happiness, the kind I was too afraid to protect." I didn't respond. Just set the phone down and watched the sun disappear into water. Dot came out with 2 glasses of wine, sat beside me without speaking. We developed a comfortable silence, the kind that came from surviving disasters together. "Do you regret any of it?" Her voice was quiet. "The fighting back, the public exposure, the destroyed family relationships?" I thought about it. Really thought about what the past year had cost. The emotional toll, the constant legal battles, the permanent estrangement from my parents. No, I regret trusting them in the first place. I regret not seeing the signs earlier. But fighting back, that's the only thing I don't regret. Good. Dot sipped her wine. "Because I've been offered a book deal. Publishers want the story. They think it'll help other victims recognize abuse and fight back." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd have to ask you. It's your story." I watched the last light fade from the sky. Thought about my name in headlines again. Thought about strangers reading the worst moments of my life. Thought about victims who might see themselves in my story and find the courage to fight their own battles. Tell them yes, but I want control over the narrative, and I want proceeds going to the foundation. Dot smiled. "I'll make the call that tomorrow." 3 years after the stolen wedding, I married someone else. Not Alex, not anyone from my old life. A Coast Guard veteran named Marcus Chen, who understood what it meant to serve, to lose, and to rebuild. We married in a small ceremony at the Memorial Hall. 20 people, no social media, no press, just the people who'd earned the right to witness my happiness. Dot walked me down the aisle at 87, still sharp, still fierce. Grace stood as my maid of honor. Emma and Lucas attended, representing the family I'd chosen rather than the one I'd been born into. My parents weren't invited. Neither was Natalie, though she was still serving her sentence anyway. Alex sent flowers, I sent them back. Marcus and I honeymooned in Seattle, the city where I'd planned to move with Alex, reclaimed for different dreams. We bought a house, adopted 2 rescue dogs, started talking about the future in ways that felt possible rather than terrifying. The foundation grew. 500 families helped, 23 million recovered, 34 convictions secured. We'd become the national resource for family fraud victims, the place people called when their own families had stolen from them. Natalie filed appeals from prison. All denied. She'd be eligible for parole in year 6. I'd prepared a victim impact statement, ensuring she served every day of her sentence. My parents tried to reconcile through Emma, wanted to know their son-in-law, wanted to be part of my life again. I said no. Some doors once closed stayed closed, but I was happy. Genuinely, sustainably happy, in ways I hadn't been before everything fell apart. Because happiness built on truth and choice and earned trust was stronger than happiness built on hope and assumption. 5 years after the stolen wedding, Natalie was released on parole. I didn't attend the hearing, didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me acknowledge her existence. She moved to Atlanta, remarried, started a new life under a new name. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances would tell me she was doing well, as if I cared. I didn't. She was just someone I used to know. Someone who'd made choices that led to consequences. Someone who tried to steal my life, and instead gave me the motivation to build a better one. The foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary. We'd helped 1,200 families, recovered $67 million in fraudulent assets, secured 98 criminal convictions. Dot was 92 now, finally slowing down. She'd handed the legal clinic to Emma, who ran it with the same fierce competence her grandmother had. Marcus and I had talked about children, decided against them. We were happy with our dogs, our work, our chosen family. That was enough. Grace had found someone too, another medical professional who understood her dedication to healing. They married in a simple ceremony that felt like the opposite of everything the stolen wedding had been. I attended as maid of honor, gave a toast about friendship that survives disasters, and the family we choose when the family we're born into fails us. Life moved forward. Not despite what had been done to me, but because of it. Because I'd refused to let theft define me. Because I'd chosen to build rather than break. Because I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't anger or bitterness. It was living well. On the 10-year anniversary of the stolen wedding, I sat in the memorial hall looking at photos documenting a decade of recovery. Thousands of faces, thousands of stories, thousands of people who'd taken back what was stolen. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "This is Cassandra Morrison Chen." Natalie's voice came through, older, tired. "It's me. I know I shouldn't call, but I wanted you to know. I'm sorry for everything. I was desperate and selfish, and I destroyed both our lives." I waited. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it. You deserved better, from all of us. Yes, I did. The foundation, what you've built. It's incredible. You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something that helps thousands of people. I didn't do it for you. I did it despite you. I know. Her voice cracked. I hope you're happy. I hope you found what I tried to take. I found better. Because I built it myself instead of stealing someone else's dream. I hung up, deleted her number, blocked it. Some conversations didn't need continuation. Some people didn't deserve access to your healing. Marcus found me an hour later, still sitting in the hall. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come." He sat beside me, put his arm around my shoulders. Didn't need to ask what I meant. We sat together in the building I'd built from betrayal, surrounded by evidence that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about transforming pain into purpose, theft into triumph, silence into strength. They'd wanted me to disappear, to accept being stolen from, to vanish quietly while they took everything I'd built. Instead, I woke up, I fought back, and I made damn sure that anyone else who'd been betrayed the way I was would have a place to turn. A foundation built on the simple truth that your story is yours, your life is yours, and no one, not family, not fear, not fraud, gets to take that away without a fight. That was the real ending, not forgiveness or revenge or closure, just the quiet certainty that I'd survived. And in surviving, I'd won.